Hey, what's up, all you solo gamers out there? This is Jeremy Santiago, aka Mighty Mouse on BGG, and I'm here with the very first episode of Versus. In these segments, we're going to look at two or more games of similar theme, design, or gameplay and put them head to head in hopes to help you decide which one is the better choice for you. In the end, I'm going to give you my choice and recommendation, but ultimately, it's a win win because most of these games we're going to be looking at are pretty awesome. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the tail of the tape. Okay, here we are at the head to head comparison. We're going to take a look at 7 different areas. You can see them on the left there: rules, learning how to play, setup, gameplay, theme, components, luck, skill, and depth, and replayability. So let's start at the top at rules and learning how to play. Here we have kind of a push. Both rule books are pretty good, easy to understand. And as far as learning how to play, they're both simple. Marvel is a basic deck builder, so if you've played one, you're going to have a pretty easy handle on learning how to play Marvel Legendary. Sentinels of the Multiverse, they've got a comic book design to their rulebook, which is kind of cool. But again, it's also easy to understand. I don't think either one is really better than the other, so it's kind of a push here in our first category. So that's kind of boring. Let's move on to something else. Setup. This is where it gets a little interesting. Marvel Legendary and the rest of the Legendary series, for a matter of fact, it actually gets worse when you get into things like Legendary Encounters. It's slow getting to the table, and it's kind of a mess coming out of the box. In Legendary Marvel, as far as setting up the game, you've got a lot of things that add to the game which make it fun, but also make it a kind of a bear to set up the game and also tearing the game down. First of all, when you're making the hero deck, you've got to choose your heroes and then shuffle them all together. You got the different villains that you have to go through to create the villain deck. You've got the scheme going on, and you've got the villain, and then there's various things that might alter the way you set the game up depending on the scenario or the scheme that you're choosing for the game. But even worse than that is the breakdown for Marvel Legendary, because you've got to sort all these decks back out, put them all into all their little decks. It takes a while just to tear this game down once you've played it. Sentinels of the Multiverse, a little better. They're going to get the check mark here. They've got dividers, which Marvel Legendary has as well. But Sentinels, they've got art on the dividers, which is kind of cool. But it's a lot more, it's a more straightforward setup here. You just choose your heroes, you grab their decks from the box, you set them down, you shuffle them, set them down. Same thing with the villain and the area that you're going to be doing your adventure or your game in. So it's a little easier, I think. Definitely quicker to get to the table and put away. You just each deck and discard pile gonna be right next to each other. You just put them back together, throw it in the box. Too easy. Um, so I'm gonna give the nod to Sentinels of the Multiverse here. Moving on to gameplay. This is where I think Marvel Legendary shines and definitely blows away Sentinels of the Multiverse here. So first of all, you got really quick turns. It's a deck builder. You have your hand of cards, that you drew from the turn before. You play them down. You recruit. You attack. Boom, done. You've got some awesome card combos. What's really fun about this game is the icon system and how that plays into everything and your choices when you're deciding which cards to purchase and put into your deck, or cards to recruit, I should say. But it's really really cool when you just rattle off this awesome combo and you just draw a card, play it, you stack up all this attack for a really big turn. It's really really fun, and that's what Marvel Legendary really does great. The icon system, we'll get into a little bit more in the theme, but that adds a lot to the gameplay and the decision making. Sentinels in the Multiverse, this is really the worst part of Sentinels of the Multiverse as far as the gameplay, is there's way too much overhead. Some of you might like this, but I think that that's going to be a minority. There's so much on the board that you have to account for, adding a +2 here for attack, a -1 over here, and then you've got the villain has a certain, thing that triggers for him. It can be a bear, and there's nothing worse than going a couple turns and realizing you weren't doing something that you should have been doing the whole time, and it's just counterintuitive. But the app, kind of changes that. We're not talking about the app here though. Um, just terrible, terrible for Sentinels of the Multiverse. Ultimately, again, if I haven't said this before, both games are great, but if we're comparing them head to head, hands down, Legendary wins in the gameplay department. Moving on to theme, I've got to give it to Legendary Marvel, if not just because you know the characters. So it's got great art. All the art here is original and commissioned for the game itself. Again, the icon system adds to the theme because let's say, for example, you've drafted or you've recruited a lot of Hulk character cards. So he's got the green icon symbol that will be able to stack up if you can combo those cards together. And those guys happen to be all about attack. You've got other characters like, let's say, Colossus or the Thing, for example. So it really works great. They integrate that really well into the game. And then you've got the whole mastermind and villain thing. Villains are going to come out. They might attack you, have different ambush effects. And the masterminds, depending on who you're going against, there's some easier ones. Then you've got, some guys like Thanos who are just really tough to bring down. And you just really feel like you are controlling the characters and you're in the Marvel world. Super fun. They do a great job. The art on the board is fantastic. Just pops right off the table. So, not to say that Sentinels of the Multiverse isn't cool as far as its theme, but again, we're going head to head, and I got to give it to Marvel here. So, one of the knocks on Sentinels of the Multiverse is the art. Some people despise it, and they really don't want to play the game because of the art. I actually don't mind it, but again, I'm going to give the nod to Marvel because the art is just that much better. The other thing is the unfamiliar characters in Sentinels of the Multiverse. They've got a whole world that they've built over at Greater Than Games for this game. And, unless you really dig into that and become familiar with them in that way, I think most people mainstream will draw themselves to Marvel 9 times out of 10 just because they can kind of recognize the characters. Of course, they've got the movies, so that really helps them. So most of us are going to lean towards Marvel Legendary in the theme. Components. This is the third one in the row that Marvel Legendary is going to win out. Now, they have some weak cards as far as the quality of the cards, but where they up the ante, I think, versus Sentinels of the Multiverse is where they supply a board with the game, which just really helps as far as laying out the game. Not to mention, it's just really cool to kind of line the guys up in their different positions and just visually and as far as making the gameplay roll smooth, that just really helps. As far as Sentinels of the Multiverse, the card quality again is not really that much better than Marvel Legendary. And one of the things that's a negative, at least for me, I've got the games on my shelf and the boxes are different sizes for some reason. I don't know why they haven't corrected that, but it's just kind of goofy and just not really creative as far as that goes. So, slight edge, Marvel Legendary, not by much, but adding the board in there just really helps. On to the next section, the luck, skill, and depth. I really think that this one is going towards the Sentinels of the Multiverse side. So with Marvel Legendary, it's a deck builder, and you can't really help it for that fact. But as deck builders go, it's pretty random. So you could have this stack of cards with heroes, and you're just not getting the cards that you want coming up out of the deck. And that, also when you're drawing your cards, you can have a really weak turn. Right towards the end of the game where you really need to take out the villain. So that can really work against you. It is very, very random in that way. Now, there is some choice in how you build your deck, of course, with any deck builder that comes into play. But again, I think the luck sometimes kind of overshadows the skill that you bring to the table. And again, we're comparing it against Sentinels of the Multiverse. I think there's more in terms of decisions even before you start the game with the hero choices that you're going to make. Now, of course, you could do this randomly, but in general, you're going to want to pick characters who combo well together. So you might want to choose the Vision, who's a character who is really great at card draw and can help the other characters in the game draw cards, and you might want to, link that one up with some other characters who are really good at combat and things like that. So even before the game, I think that comes into play. And then the enemy deck. So there's timing involved because it's not a random deck, and each character has their own pre-made deck. You can go into a game, planning a couple turns in advance, looking at your cards and deciding exactly when you want to play certain cards, and maybe hold out, for a specific card to come up, or even try to, draw through your deck to get certain things going. So I think there's definitely more decisions while you're playing the game as to what you're going to do playing the game, even between the certain characters. And playing this solo, you have that opportunity to really, go from 3 to 5 characters, making it harder or easier for yourself as you're playing the game. And now onto our last category or criteria, replayability. And this is a complete push here. Both these games have tons and tons of content. It's really great for a gamer. So Legendary Marvel, you can play as any character you really can think of. I'm not that in tune with the comic books in the Marvel universe, so every character that I know is definitely there and then some. So there's just really some off-the-wall characters that I'd never even heard of that you can play with in this game. And of course, they've got all the ones that you know and love. I think they've really focused on trying to get the characters out there that are in the movies into this game. On top of that, Sentinels of the Multiverse, they just match it. So they've got tons of expansions. They've actually got one that's coming out very soon that is just going to add even more to the game. I think as is, it's just fantastic. Both of these games give you a lot of content just in the box itself, with multiple villains to go against and scenarios, Marvel Legendary or, Heroes and Sentinels of the Multiverse. You add a couple of expansions and you've really got tons and tons to go with. And then by nature, both of these games just give you a lot to throw into a game to mix it up so that every time you play, you just have a new experience. So, with that being said, covering all, I think you can tally it up. It's pretty safe to say that Marvel Legendary is going to win. So sorry, Sentinels of the Multiverse. Marvel Legendary, I think where it really separates this out is when we were talking about gameplay. It all comes down to that overhead in Sentinels of the Multiverse. I think that is such a detriment and negative in this game that it just really creates more headaches than need be. I can get over the fact that Marvel Legendary is kind of a pain in the butt when it comes to putting the game away, but you have so much fun playing this game that it just overshadows that. So Sentinels in the Multiverse, good game, but going head to head, if you want comic book heroes and you want to take down some villains and do some cool card combos, your comic book card game of choice should be Marvel Legendary. So guys, there you have it. Thank you very much for listening or watching. Agree, disagree, let me know. Let's talk about it. But as for me, Mighty Mouse, I've got to go with Marvel Legendary. Thanks, you guys.